Hey there, I'm Kendra Summers, and this is the first installment of my podcast, Capstone Conversation. I'm here today with KDKA director and color commentary Emmy winner, Kristen Kudla. Kristen, how are you?
Hi. Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me on the podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to start with your background, just so everyone can get a feel for how you came to be so accomplished in your field. So, could you share a little bit about your past education and what kind of stuck for your passion for the field you're in now?
Yeah, of course. Well, I got my education back at Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Graduated class of 2016. Go Bobby Mo.
Mhm.
And I started off in broadcasting at RMU. At the time, it was kind of like a communications field where you had to like have a concentration in TV video production and got really involved with student media. I literally did everything. So I was like the program director for the radio station. I was on air talent. I was sideline reporter for live events.
Oh, like a little bit of
Direct
everything.
One thing they teach you in college is try everything,
Hmm.
and oh boy, did I do that. So got really involved with sports broadcasting and just broadcasting in general. And then I graduated, and then you had that like quarter life crisis when you graduate, and you're like, well, what
Absolutely.
am I supposed to do?
I'm almost there.
Uh,
It's gonna happen in about 1 month.
it's terrifying, especially like with everything that's going on now. It's like, do you go more behind the scenes, more in front, and do
Absolutely.
you go cable? Do you go internet, social media? I feel like now there's a lot more
Hmm.
opportunity for everybody.
But
But getting
you
sidetracked.
you ended up as a
Pardon me?
behind the camera person.
I did. So I actually started college wanting to be a sports broadcaster and being in front of the camera. Was fortunate enough to get a lot of opportunities at RMU. Won an Emmy with some great people covering their hockey tournament and their hockey team. But then I realized, like speaking in front of people is great, but
Hmm.
being in front of the camera, maybe not for me.
Got it.
So I had a great opportunity right straight out of college. Like I had the job even before I graduated. Started in master control, which is kind of like you roll the brakes kind of things and
Hmm.
do TV content for stations. Kind of got bored with that real quick because
Gotcha.
I'm a people person, and I was stuck in a room with one other person for 8 hours a day.
Wasn't enough
No,
for you.
some people love it. Me, not so much. Then, fortunately enough, one of my friends from college, she was leaving the industry and she had a great opportunity at Channel 4, which is WTAE here in Pittsburgh. And she was like, hey, listen, I think you'd be great for this. It's an associate director job. You'll be talking with a lot of people, working with on-air talent, and then you actually get to direct shows. And I was like, at that point, I took the first job straight out of college, then uh realized it wasn't for me. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna try
Hmm.
this. Took it, fell in love with directing, working with local news. Was at Channel 4 for a couple years, and then had a great opportunity at KDKA, become a full-time director, and here we are.
Awesome. What does that entail? Like, I'm so curious to know what being a director at KDK is like.
So it's it's a juggling act, definitely. My mom says it's like an orchestra director
Hmm.
because you're sitting behind right now. KDK is fully automated, and we're actually going into an interesting transition at KDKA where we're actually slowly transitioning over to automation, which changes what I'm going to do. Not really, but in a way drastically. So right
What do
now
you mean
we're
by
fully crewed.
automation?
Pardon me?
What do you mean by automation?
So right now we're fully crewed, meaning that there's a person at every position. There's a person
Hmm.
at technical director, audio, camera, every position. Whenever you go into automation, a lot of stations do that, is that it kind of brings everything down to one position. So you run it out of a computer that will you hit like you use a system that one person controls all of it, and the computer itself will open up microphones, will move cameras for you, and you're just
Oh,
basically taking.
Technological
And
advancements changing your job.
yeah, and it's terrifying because
Absolutely.
although technology is greatly advancing and it's helping a lot of people, you're also running into people whose livelihoods are being jeopardized. Fortunately enough, at KDKA, everybody on our crew right now will be trained to be
Hmm.
able to do all the same jobs. So fortunately enough, right now, nobody's jobs are in jeopardy, but we
Hmm.
are in that part in the industry where a lot of things are going automated and run by computers.
And I think for every job prospect, like the idea that you could be replaced by AI or a computer that can do the same thing is troubling.
It's terrifying. Whenever I actually applied for my job and I went for the interview at KDKA, rumors were swirling around that they were going to go to automation. And this was like 2 years ago. So I specifically asked my boss and I said, are you going to go to automation? Because I don't want to sit in front of a computer with one other person.
Hmm.
Like I said, I did that for my first job. I don't want to do that now. He
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
why
oh,
you
no.
left.
Mm-hmm. And he's like, automation's been in a box for like 10 years and we haven't touched it. And I was like, great. Then we get this new news director, and a lot of changes are happening, which I no hate on my news director. He's fantastic, great, making a lot of great changes. But
Hmm.
with those changes come some uh, troubling questions.
Yeah. As
And
a director, do you have any like concerns? Obviously, computers and AI can't do the same things that people can do. So like, do you see any discrepancies if that takes place?
now I haven't worked with automation, so like all I'm going off of is what I've is just the preconceived notion of like what it's like.
Hmm.
And I you can do a newscast, like your general newscast. I can foresee being very easy to do in automation. Other than breaking news where you're not gonna be able to go to it as quickly as if you were to have a fully manned crew or make quick corrections that you would have with a fully manned crew, that's fine. But where the trouble is going to be is those live shows that are like talk shows and more people shows where there's a lot of zooms and you're going by the you're kind of just going with the flow.
Hmm.
Those shows I think are going to be the most troubling with automation, um, because everything's going to be robotic and it's going to be one person behind a computer that's worrying about getting mic checks from other people, making sure the camera's in the right place, and they're not going to have the ability to make those changes on the fly as quickly.
Yeah, it's entirely too stressful. I agree with you. When you talked about sports just now, do you do sports at the moment? Do you cover it?
Yes, I actually do. I am actually the director for KDK does Pittsburgh Steelers coverage,
Hmm.
and I'm actually the director for the post game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So whenever for our Steelers show, I should say. So if you're watching the Pittsburgh Steelers on KDKA and then they cut and here comes Bob Pompiani saying, "Hey, you just watched the Steelers lose to the Bills," blah 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 blah.
Hmm.
That show is actually one of the shows that I direct.
That's awesome. What does that look like for you? Like a day, like a game day. What does that look like for you?
So full God bless the sports department on game day because they are there. So say your average game goes on at 1 o'clock.
Hmm.
They're there from like 9 o'clock. They have their show on at 11, whether it's a 1 o'clock game, 8 o'clock game. They're there from like 9 o'clock in the morning till like almost midnight all
Wow.
day. Yeah, sports is like football season is a very stressful time for sports department. But I'm fortunate enough that I don't have to come in till my crew calls technically at 3, but I come in at halftime. So as soon as halftime hits, whenever I'm watching the game, I'm hitting the road. I'm getting there by the third quarter. I sit down. Fortunately enough, because it is another go with the flow show, we have a rundown that we're able to go off of, but it's very much okay. I like that shot. We're going to take this shot. This person's talking about this. I'm going to take that VO, and then me and our producer for our post show have a very good working relationship that he'll be like, oh hey, we're talking about um, Kenny Pickett, and he's like, oh, I have that video here, and I'm able to take it.
Hmm. Do you have like creative control? Do you have a vision that you put in place?
give and take. So he kind of, the producer will put the building blocks in place and then I will execute it. So a producer will want a show to look a specific way, but I can make creative decisions of adding a zoom or making a suggestion here, or, hey, I think at the beginning of our show, we should do a move on this camera and then cut those things. But he will, like, specifically for that sports show, our producer will be like, I want you to take that video now. And him and I have just come to that working relationship that we can communicate that way.
I'm glad you guys get along well. I think that's really important.
Well, it's actually really funny because I had an internship back at Root Sports in Pittsburgh. He was my internship advisor.
Oh,
and
wow.
It
So
comes
you already
full
had
circle. Yeah.
Yeah, you already knew him. So everything went fine. You're still working with one person, but with everyone else on the outside.
Yeah, and it was like, it was nice being able to actually like know him and kind of like see it come full circle.
As a director, is there anything that you would say was the hardest thing for you to cover?
Emotionally or like
Both.
physically for the so I predominantly work in news, and there's a lot of depressing stuff in news, and where you're covering shootings, deaths, fires. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of happy stories that you're covering, but the emotional toll of sitting behind the director's seat for an 8-hour shift where you're seeing the same stories over and over again do play a toll on you a little bit. I've covered some breaking news in my short tenure as a director where I was working the day of the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh. I fortunately enough had like just left work, so I didn't I didn't do anything that day, but I called
hard hitting.
The coverage of that day for the next several months where you're just, everything is about these lives that were taken from you or taken from this world. And then another incident is I was working the day of the Fern Hollow Bridge collapse in Pittsburgh, and that I was at KDKA where I was actually directing. At the time, we're sitting down and we find out that the bridge collapsed. We're immediately in breaking news coverage. Whenever you're in wall-to-wall coverage, you are sitting in that seat. There's no bathroom breaks, there's no commercial breaks, there's nothing for it. And you have to sit there, and you and your crew have to work together, from your anchors to your producers to your director to your reporters, your photogs, everybody. And as a director, you have to be in that seat, being able to communicate with everybody and figure out, kind of like think 5 steps ahead, where you're like, okay,
crazy intense.
That was probably my most intense time directing, was the Fern Hollow, because I was sitting in that seat from 4:30 in the morning till 11.
Oh, wow.
Now, fortunately, my boss was able to come in and give me like 20-minute breaks, half-hour breaks. But like at one point, I just remember stepping away and just going over to the steps and just sitting there. And I'm just like, holy crap, this is intense.
Do you take any, I'm trying to think of the words, any precautions? Like when you were in such a rush and so scrambled, like during the Tree of Life shooting coverage, that you have so much to do, but you also have to remember to like take care and be conscientious of the victims' families. Like,
yes.
Is there anything that goes into balancing fair and true reporting also with like sympathy and empathy?
So fortunately enough, the KDKA is in our the other stations here at Pittsburgh are in a larger market than the other stations. So fortunately enough, all the people that we are working with are all people who have done this, and we know what to do. And whenever you are in those situations, you have to report the facts, which can be the hardest parts. But you also have to consider that these are human beings, and these are stories that need to be told, but need to be told correctly. And in breaking news situations like that, you got to be, from a director standpoint, where we're working more on the visual, you have to be careful of what you're showing. Meaning you need to make sure that your lower thirds, your graphics have the correct information on it. You need to make sure your photogs are shooting the right stuff. And God forbid, if you're in a breaking news situation and say a body's found, you need to make sure that your photog or don't bodies. You got to worry about, and luckily a lot of that stuff is screened ahead of time, but you need to, and as a reporter and journalist in general, you need to make sure that what you're reporting on is facts. Like
Yeah,
last night
absolutely.
at work, we had to, a body was found. Some hunters actually found a human skull out in the
Oh,
woods. Yeah,
this was
but we weren't,
yesterday.
this was yesterday, but we weren't able to report that it was a skull because we didn't have that confirmed.
Hmm.
So you have to wait to, we can report that remains were found because they can confirm that, but they couldn't confirm that it was a human skull, and we weren't able to report that specific fact till later on.
It's just taking a lot of responsibility to make sure that, like, when you're in the sensitive situations, that someone's family might be watching, and
Yeah.
every single thing you do has to be entirely accurate.
Now, as a director, I only have control of what people are seeing. The information falls down to reporters and producers. So
Hmm.
like if I don't if we're reporting on something and the information is correct, that's not something I have control over as a
Hmm.
director. But if I see a video, if they were shooting video and it's showing something that I think is incorrect as a director, now some producers might hate this, but I'll jump out the camera further on the anchor and be like, no, we're not showing that.
Really?
I haven't had to do that for anything,
But you
but
would.
I if it's something that I don't want to say that I would, but if like what we're showing more broadly is like if we're running a story about a fire and
Hmm.
I'm showing in the video that was attached to that story is like kids playing in a playground. I'm like, this is the wrong video,
Yeah.
clearly. So I'm gonna take that anchor on camera, keep that clean as much as I can, and we can
Hmm.
readdress what the issue was later on.
Wow. I mean, this is a lot of hard hitting. You really do dabble into everything, because we've talked about sports, we've talked about covering fires, finding human skulls.
Yeah,
Do
like
you get
my
overwhelmed by the amount of things that you cover?
yeah, and I also do a talk show at my job, like KDKA. I was fortunate enough to make this career jump to be able to kind of dabble in like news, hard news, talk show, and sports.
Hmm. So speaking of sports, you won an Emmy for
Yeah,
color commentary. And I'm gonna be
yeah,
honest with you, when I heard Emmy, I was like, oh wow. There's a subsection I haven't heard of. So I did my research as much as I could, and I found out that it's for sports. So if you want to tell us a little bit about that, like, congratulations.
yeah.
But
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I unfortunately have not been able to grasp that uh actual like post collegiate Emmy, like in
Mhm.
my actual career. Not saying that college isn't part of your career, but we yeah. So I did a color commentary a lot in college, where I did basketball, hockey, did some softball. Let me tell you, calling softball in baseball in general is one of the hardest things to do
Fast
because
paced.
it is so boring to watch.
Mm,
But
understandable. What is color
yeah.
commentary?
So the way that I like to explain it is that so every broadcast you have like you have two people talking. You have your regular person who's calling the game, which we'll use hockey for example. That person is the one that says, and here comes Mario Lemieux up the ice. He passes over the blue line, blah 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 blah. And he is giving the verbal description of what you're physically seeing. And
Hmm.
then your color commentator is the one who will break it down and why that is interesting. So like if somebody scores and there was like a trick play or something like that, or very nice like stick handling or something, we're talking about hockey,
Gotcha.
your color commentator is the one that's going to break that down, be like, oh, that was a great goal because he was able to do blah 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 blah.
What specifically
And
did you win for?
I was at Robert Morris. We were covering RMU's. I believe they were going. It was there. It was a postseason run, and it was just like any other game. We're calling it how we see it. We're just having a good time. And one of my friends had took it, cut it up, submitted it, And then turns out they're like, hey, by the way, we won this Emmy, or we're nominated for this Emmy. And I was like, no way, you're kidding me, right?
And you
And they're
won.
like, then we ended up winning. I remember that day because I ended up not going to the Emmys. That was one of my biggest regrets. I did not go to the Emmys that year because I had won tickets to go see Hunter Hayes in concert.
Gotcha.
And I was like, I'm going to go see Hunter Hayes. Standing in line and find out that we won, and I screamed. I
Funnily
was,
enough,
yeah. And then
I won a Golden Quill for excellence in written journalism. And because I was so sure,
some.
thank you. I was so sure that I wasn't winning that I made plans for that night and didn't get a ticket for the dinner. And then I had about 30 people text me at once. And they were like, "Where are you? What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm just hanging out." And they were like, "Well, you have an award. You have a plaque that you have to come get." I think it's funny. I think it's funny when we end up in these situations where you skip events that you've won something at.
And you're like, I'm not going to win that.
Yeah.
One thing I have learned though is that like always be your biggest fan. Like
Hmm.
push for yourself. Like one thing that I've been trying to do the past couple years is remembering shows that I've directed that have been difficult or challenging, and making sure when Emmy season comes around, I'm like, I want this submitted.
Yeah.
I want to put my name on this, and
So
I'm trying.
advocating for yourself, putting your work out there.
That's the biggest thing, is because especially in this industry, you will have so many people who will walk over you, think your opinion doesn't matter, but you need to stand firm and be like, okay, well, let's question some things.
Hmm.
And you got to when a society starts having a single thought mentality, that's when the issues start happening. And being a journalist, you need to be able to give a voice to those stories that aren't being told.
I believe heavily in speaking things into existence. Like when you're really passionate about something, the energy that you put into it is well received.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you. Speaking of the energy, because me and everyone that's listening to this podcast is going to be job searching in just about a month right after graduation. What do you think is important for someone like me that's going to get into the job market right after this? Like what qualities, skills, things do you think I need to have?
Be a people person. I know that's difficult for certain people because, there's a lot of weirdos in our industry, me being one of them.
Hmm. You
And
mean like nerds?
be your you pardon me?
Like nerds?
Yes.
Yeah, we're all
Love nerds.
nerds.
We love it. Be a weirdo, be your authentic self, and just put yourself out there. Find those connections, whatever you're like. Just you find somebody who's in the industry, hey, great, get their contact information.
Hmm.
Join up on LinkedIn, because that's how I got my jobs. I got my first job out of college because I was so close with some adults in our media arts department, and they knew somebody who needed a job. So they're like, hey, you should apply for this. I'm like, great, cool,
Hmm.
apply for it, got it. Then for my next job, my friend who left and was like, hey, I think you'd be great for this, got it, applied, got it. Then for KDKA, one of my coworkers who knew I was part-time and trying to go full-time, he was like, listen, I don't want you to leave, but here's a full-time gig. And then because I made such good connections with my internship when I did it, the several people from said internship, like I had talked about earlier, work at KDKA. And
Hmm.
so whenever my name came through, they saw that I worked at Root. They had asked these people about me and they were like, oh, she's a great person. And I was able to get the job that way. Make those connections.
Right. So being personable is kind of essential because that's how people remember you. That's how they advocate for you to get these positions.
Absolutely. And especially because if you're personable and you're able to stand your ground, companies will recognize that.
Hmm. And would you say anything to anyone that was a little stressed in terms of finding a job, breaking into something that they don't feel they're ready for?
Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. I am a firm believer that like everything works out the way that it should. It might not work out right now, but you never know down the line. And things change. I started my career wanting to be a sports broadcaster, and here I am directing, which is on the behind the camera, opposite side, whatever.
And you're still
And
happy.
and I'm still doing what I want to do. And even though my first job wasn't what I wanted, I took what I was able to get and to get my foot into the door. I know it's a very like old thought process, but take the jobs where you can have it,
No,
where
everyone's
you
got to
can get
start
them.
somewhere.
Exactly. And then that's where you make those connections and you can build it up. Because unfortunately, especially in this industry and where it's going, I don't think a lot of people are gonna be able to get jobs with what they want at a livable wage
Mhm.
right away. And but you got to work up into that, and you got to like, I hate saying that because I sound like my mother.
I think success looks different on everyone. Like
Yeah.
you might
Mhm.
have an idea in your head and then you get to where you objectively need to be and you think it's a little different, but in the long run it'll help you.
Exactly. And like, I have a friend who is one of the best announcers that I've ever heard. He is fantastic.
Hmm.
He works in a master control operator and then does color commentary for colleges on the side. So
Nice.
he's able to balance that out and like still put his feet in the pool and everything and still do what he wants.
It's like you said, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, yeah. And that's another thing. If you were in college and you were listening to this now and you have the opportunity to do everything that you can. If like people who just like go to classes and just do the school work, I think have a lot more harder of a time getting a job than those
Mhm.
who go outside of their classrooms
I agree.
and
Campus
apply themselves.
organizations, joining a bunch of campus organizations when I was a freshman has given me like a lot of tools for not just talking to, but working
Mhm.
with people,
Mhm.
learning how to release control and
Mhm.
work. I was not a good group work person before I joined SGA. I'm the president of the Student Government Association.
Heck
So,
yeah.
a lot of compatibilism exists in that position, like balancing my own authority with working with other people. And I think if I had just gone through college, done my classes, and went home, first of all, I wouldn't be in the position, but I would also be missing a lot of vital skills that I have now.
But like, how do you do what I've always wondered is that I was able to figure out what I wanted to do because of those extracurriculars, because I
Absolutely.
was involved in the student media, and like, I always wonder like how sure those people are to be able to just go to the schoolwork and just go to class.
Mhm.
And I would have been bored out of my mind if I
No,
wouldn't have done extra stuff.
I know exactly what you mean. I knew I had a passion for social justice and advocacy, but being in SGA and watching the change that I make be tangible, like
Hmm.
seeing in real time things changing on the campus that I go to, has really like sparked it in me that like, oh, this is what you want to do because look at the feeling that you have after you've accomplished these things.
And look at all the great things that you were accomplishing. Look at
Hmm.
that footprint that you were putting on that campus. And it's such a great feeling to look back on your days back in college or whatever at future education that you're doing. And you're like, I did that. That was me.
Absolutely. I'm feeling it right now and I'm excited for whatever comes next.
Absolutely. Be proud of yourself. If there's one thing that I hope that I can encourage in people is to be able to be proud of what they do and to stand up for yourself and to know that you accomplished something or that you are going to accomplish something.
Yeah, absolutely. And to take a deep breath. I think it was
Yeah,
important when you said that.
take a deep breath. There's one thing that I have learned whenever I started directing. I was so freaking nervous when I tell
Mhm.
you I actually the first day that I was supposed to direct during breaking news did not direct. I refused to sit in that seat. I was scared out of
Mhm.
my mind. And like now breaking news happens or we're doing a show or something like that, I take a deep breath, I see what's in front of me and we tackle it step by step. But like we have a kind of a running joke whenever me and my crew work together is that as long as the show is clean and it might have been a rough show to get there, but it's a very morbid way of looking at it, but nobody died and nobody was hurt, so who
Mhm.
cares?
Oh, absolutely. One of my biggest principles when I'm like I have to host events for SGA, nobody needs to know all the trouble that we went through and how hard it was to get the event to where it was. But it was successful and people liked it, and that's all that matters. Your end result. You were able to pull it off and you made something great.
And I think that whenever you realize the bigger picture of that, and when you realize that like those people don't realize what's going on in the background, yeah, it kind of seems like what you're doing may not be worth it, but also it's like it is worth it, and it's like it's freeing. It was freeing to me whenever I developed that mentality to be like, you know what, the show was clean, it was
Mhm.
fine, and don't stress out about it. Well,
Yeah.
like it was one thing, you're done, like you're fine.
Nitpicking yourself is like being your own worst enemy.
Absolutely. And like you can be your own worst critic. And I like, even to this day, even though I've been doing this for several years, I still sit back on those shows that I have a harder time and I'm like, okay, what could I have done better? And going up to my coworkers and being like, hey, how do you think I should have done this? What do you think? Do you think I handled this well? And talking with your peers and critiquing that kind of stuff.
Hmm. Doing whatever you can to get better, not sitting in and like dwelling on what you did wrong or what you perceive was incorrect, but just
Or else
finding ways to fix it.
and not being stagnant because
Hmm.
there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
You can be the top of your game. Kobe Bryant, one of the best basketball players of all time, still critiqued himself and still was able to like he still got better
Hmm.
year after year.
And we can be the same as Kobe Bryant.
I wish,
Just putting
right?
it- Thank you so much for talking to me today and for being
Of
on
course. It was
the
so
show
much
here.
fun being on.
Yeah, so that was our session with Kristen Kudla. Thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thanks so much for having me. I had so much fun.